Uchegbu, convener, Speaking Fingers Network, and also lead facilitator of Live Work Ready program for deaf teens. Thank you for always answering my call when I call you. You've always never turned me down, and I appreciate you for that. I'm always very grateful to have you.
WFM makes me proud as a woman.
Thank you always. Thank you. And also, I have over the phone. I connected with Gang Moses Sunday Sander over the last weekend. I was supposed to have him over the radio, and then we just got talking, and he spoke about his passion for persons with disability. And I was like, oh, I'm having a conversation on Monday, and he readily yesterday just gave me his attention. Good morning to you, Gang Moses.
Good morning, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Of the popular and famous The Big Question. Yes. Me on the program.
Yes. All right. Thank you for joining us this morning. Also, we have in the studio Nkechi Manuel Ayode. She's our counselor here at Women Radio, and she's always helping us put a balance to every conversation that we have here. But I'm going to start off with Treasure this morning. When we look at this particular days of 16 days of activism, somebody was reaching out to me over the course of 2 weeks ago of the exclusion of persons with disability when we talk about sexual gender-based violence. How do you see the addressing of sexual gender-based violence from the person of disability perspective?
Thank you very much, Daniel. Beautiful. From the perspective of disability, we are often, I say we because they are often excluded. You find out that they're excluded and they are not participating in the process. Oftentimes, people are speaking on their behalf. They don't have a platform where the voice is heard in an accessible form.
Yeah.
For instance, this is radio. My deaf cannot listen in. Our deaf community and cluster cannot listen in. So there's this exclusion, and we need to begin to bring them to the table, irrespective of their disability cluster. Okay. So that's my brief when it has to do with including, or from the perspective of persons living with disability themselves.
Thank you very much. I also want to notice that Gang Moses this morning is the resource person at Speed Care Inclusion and Resource Center on special education rehab for persons with disability and advocate against gender-based violence. So, Gang, how much, when we look at this particular issue of gender-based violence from the perspective of what we have right now, how has women and girls with disability been made vulnerable to violence in Nigeria?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Daniel, and thanks for having me for the very first time on radio with WFM. Persons with disabilities, particularly women and girls, they are marginalized, they are vulnerable. They are that silent voice in the society or community that are not attended to. And for that reason, people tend to take advantage of their disability, so to say, to violate them one way or the other, particularly sexually. People tend to believe that or think or feel that women and girls who are disabled are not just like any of us who are said to be normal, to say. But we are all human beings, and we have the same feelings, the same blood that flows into our veins. So that natural and innate tendencies, for everyone, they also have it too. So, but more often than not, you find that persons with disabilities, just like my colleague over there on the radio in the studio said, we tend to speak for them. We tend to do things for them. They are not being involved. They're not being included in so many things that borders on persons with disabilities. So more often than not, they fall vulnerable.
Yes.
And, they're easily being lured to sexual acts that they never consented to. So they are always vulnerable in this regard.
Thank you. I'd like us to quickly talk about discrimination, because I know discrimination is a big part is one of the major challenges that persons with disabilities are going through, and this is a very major issue. Let me ask Treasure, how has the issue of discrimination, aided us, not really finding lasting solutions to the inclusion of persons with disability?
You see, everything life borders on the everything furthers on the legal framework.
Okay.
What is the ground norm? What is that human right for?
Okay.
You understand? So, but you find that persons with disabilities are not being involved or included in the scheme of things when it concerns the general public.
Okay.
There always that silent voice that they feel these people can't do anything. They can't do anything on their own. So people tend to stand proxy on their behalf in one way or the other. And when people stand proxy on their behalf, things are not done right.
Done
Things
the
are
right
not
way.
done,
Thank you.
in such a way that it will include them and involve them directly in the scheme of things.
All right.
So the issue of being excluded or being segregated is prone to happen because persons with disabilities are not seen, if not for the advocacy drive of some of us who have been trained in the line, and when we see ills and misgivings against them, we tend to stand for them.
Let me come to Treasure. Let me get Treasure's opinion on this question also, on how discrimination of women and girls has actually not allowed us to be able to find a lasting solution to the proper inclusion of them.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, sir, Mr. Gang. Well done. Practically speaking, okay, when I started the Life Work Ready program for the deaf, I found out that some companies that come around the area, promotional companies, I don't want to mention brand, that provide information to school children, and sometimes they provide pads to teenagers. They boycott, they just pass the deaf school. They just go on and they don't feel that they need sexual education. Fast forward also my own experience. When I started the Life Work Ready program, I wanted to talk very much to providing sexual education. And the first thing I was told on the first day I wanted to raise that topic was, here we don't talk about things like marriage, things like sex education, reproductive health, because there's a tendency to arouse the children. Those mindsets are changed now because we were able to bring in companies that provided them with menstrual hygiene.
Yes.
So there's no way you talk about that and you will not talk about provide some form of sex education. We've had opportunity where so the narrative is changing, but unlike before, you still see some of them still come and pass and feel because they do not understand probably sign language or can't communicate, they can't have fun. So they go to other schools, provide them with some form of fun games and a lot of things. Well, like I say, it's a work in progress. So things like that, excluding them, things like that. Then persons, particularly girls and girls with disability, they are susceptible to mercy killing.
Okay.
So you find out that they give birth to a woman finds out that she maybe at the antenatal she's asked to do a scan, and she finds out that the child that she's carrying is a child probably would have come out with a disability, and she can opt for that child to be killed. And so that is some of the knowledge, attitude, and practice in our society. We can't help it, but we can begin, like what WFM is doing, provide and raise those awareness. Yeah.
All right. So one of the major reasons why I looked at this particular conversation is when we look at the issue of gender-based violence, it's easier for somebody who can speak, somebody who has some level of control over their body, somebody who has the legs and hand to, to have some form of self-defense. But then I wanted to really find out this morning on how is the education on gender-based violence carried out for persons with disability? How is the education carried out? Gang, do you want to start with that question?
Well, before I start with that question, and let me bust the bubble a bit. I happen to be, I train as a special educationist with bias with deaf education. So I'm home with my colleague over there on this matter. So the thing there is that you see, persons with disabilities, particularly women and girls, for their disability in terms of language, communication, deficit, you find that people take advantage over them on so many fronts. You know, you could find you see them on motor park sometimes. Most of them seeking for one assistant or the other. Before you know it, somebody, okay, is it not all about the money? You give them the money, you corner them, and you do whatever you feel like doing with them. And at that point in time, you know, constant, whether given or not, it will be seen as if it's granted, and people take advantage over them on when it comes to sexual molestation and stuff like that. So women and girls with disabilities, you know, they fall prey to all to some of these vices in our community, in our society.
Okay.
And the issue of education, you know, you find that less activity, less programs are being done, are not being done, are not being carried on, you know, in their favor. You find that you go to government hall, you go to hospital, there's no interpreter there who takes care of such a need. How does the patient, you know, a woman or a girl with disability, you know, will communicate, particularly somebody who is deaf? How will he or she communicate is his or her problem? I mean her problem, you know, to the medical practitioners, you know, so that they'll be able to get the right diagnosis and the right medication thereafter. So you see most of these things, you know, affecting persons with disabilities, particularly women and girls with disabilities, the more, because we do not have the right people at the right place at the right time to stand in for them, to speak for them, or to involve them in some of our programs and activities. Particularly these 16 days of activism, this being the 6th day, you know, how well have the disability community, women and girls, have been carried on this program?
Okay.
You know, very little, I could say. So, despite the fact that we have disability groups spread across the country, and, you know, but you can't find any active or probably direct or maybe deliberate effort to bring in this group of people into the scheme of.
Thank you. Let me come to Treasure now. Still on that same question on the education of persons with disability and with regards to ensuring that there is proper education for them on sexual gender-based violence, and even sexual health. What is the process? If somebody who is in a community where there is a person with a particular form of disability, how do they have such conversations with them?
Practically now, that has to be accessible. It has to include them. You could practically ask what they know. Funny enough, I brought a renowned, we had a renowned psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist, at a time when the drug abuse thing was, where the tramadol thing was really in. So I called her, I said, "Doctor, please come. I need you to come and educate the teenagers on our life skill intervention." She said, Treasures, will that work? I said, come along. And we went. And she was shocked by the time she was asking, what can drugs do? What kinds of drugs? And she was shocked to know that they were gesticulating the different kinds of drugs, hard drugs that is out there, the different kinds of substance. So asking what they know, you'll be amazed at the things that are stored inside of them. You can imagine if it's somebody who is coming from a very wrong perspective or bringing a wrong, or like Mr. Gian had mentioned, throwing money at them to do something that is evil or uncivil, you know, they will jump at it because that attention has been given to them. So practically finding out first and foremost what is on their inside. You can do that in an accessible form. There's nothing wrong with taking the care to them or carrying that knowledge to where they are, like and complementing what it is that they do in the academics. So that becomes like a compliment. So you could ask. When you ask, of course, you are going there with a knowledge that is accessible. I remember when we started, we wanted to do a word for word kind of, but we found out that these are visual learners, for instance. So for the blind, you can provide accessible in braille form for them to also. We do WhatsApp. We do WhatsApp. So you could provide such knowledge and a follow-up in a way that is accessible to that child. Check in through text message if it's a deaf, for instance. So, and there's nothing wrong with learning sign language.
There's nothing wrong. I'm gonna try. It's gonna be my first quarter 2021.
Beautiful.
mandate.
Welcome on board. I know I've been harassing all of you.
Fumi has been on my case. Fumi of sign language has also been on my case, and I'm like, okay, don't worry.
Beautiful.
First quarter of next year, I'm going to
Beautiful.
pay more attention to it. This is still the big question on Women Radio 91.7, 28 minutes to 10. It's the 16 days of activism is what we're talking about, and today is day 6, and we're addressing violence against women and girls with disability. Now, I'd really like to find out, because I sometimes sharing stories of persons with disability who have experienced some form of sexual abuse or gender-based violence would help people understand the stories better. So I don't know if you have been heard or any of these cases have been reported to you before. Treasure.
That becomes another challenge, the culture of silence. So we need to be deliberate in requesting that those silence be broken, even from them as young people with disabilities also. You find out that oftentimes it's always swept under the carpet. They are not provided opportunities. The opportunities are becoming, they are there. Because some of the things we want to discuss at the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, what legal palliative and aids that are accessible, that is available. And we have the Women Lawyers Association come to speak to that particular intervention. So the opportunities are there, but they are not invited, because that's what inclusion is. It's about inviting them to partake, to show them the value that is available and inviting them to partake. So oftentimes the culture of silence fuels that. A case in point was one of my deaf role models who wanted to see, he was seeking admission, and a particular person was just harassing all that, and she was able to screenshot. He didn't know she had that capability to screenshot that discussion and sent it to her brother. The brother, who knows that I'm also her mentor, sent it back to me, and we almost wanted to chew him. So, but at that point, because there have not been actual sex, for instance, that has not happened. We find out that what can we do? What should be done? The harassment is not, that is just one evidence the man can actually deny. So oftentimes it's not always brought to the fore. There are instances that it has happened even in school, the school where I run, but we find out that oftentimes families find a way of trying to, let's cover whatever it is that is among us. Let's not expose ourselves, because when that goes out, it's rubbing off on our family.
Let me pause your thoughts there and ask Gang Moses this morning, because one of the major challenge I know that a lot of the disability committee have and are still constantly dealing with is the shame culture that comes with it. How is this being addressed? How is the Speedlight addressing this issue of shame that is that has been put by a certain group of the society on persons with disability?
Yeah, that's a very good one, Mr. Daniel. You see, the issue of curtailing or probably putting shame at first burner, in the front burner, trying to cover up and do a wrongdoing, it's there in the society, and very it's also there with women and girls with disability. You find that because particularly the deaf, where there is a deficit of language and communication, you find that when they gesticulate, or probably when they want to sign, or when they want to put on a red alert that this person, or my uncle or my neighbor, is trying to do things funny on my body. Once the parents or guardians who see someone listen, they will just shut them off. They will shut them off. Don't say that. Don't even tell anybody. Otherwise, you want to be killed. You're trying to gesticulate a knife and a knife on the neck. To such a person who is not well educated, or well enlightened, such a person will keep quiet, and that person continue to suffer in silence. So instead of inviting them in like a program of 16 days of activism like that, instead of inviting them, let's take the program to them. By so doing, they'll be able to be involved and included fully. And by the time any knowledge they gain in programs and activities like this, they're able to step it down to their other colleagues who happen not to be in such a high caliber of training programs or anything like that. So by taking the program to them, we'll give them that concept. Yes, we are being thought of, we are being included, we are being involved directly.
Let me come to my next question is regards to education right now, because not just the persons with disability, but the caregivers to these persons with disabilities. That is something that I'm also very concerned about, because we have seen, like the case you just mentioned now of, now trying to explain, and then the caregiver to that particular thing is trying to shut that person down. What form of education should we be giving to these caregivers, those who, especially for parents? At one of the times I had you on the radio, I think at the earliest time, you talked about a parent who was hiding their deaf child. They were just hiding the child, and they were not even aware of the level of education that is available for such children. So now that we are on the radio, for anybody who is listening and they're trying to who is a caregiver to a child who has a form of disability or the other, and they are still around that shaming system, is still somewhere around them, how do we deal with this? What do you say to them?
With me?
Yes, you gang.
Okay. Obviously, when it comes to educating parents or is about caregivers or parents?
Okay, so there's a different training for caregivers and a different training for parents.
Yeah, well, of course, there are different programs for caregivers and even parents as well. Parents will have their own role at home to play.
Okay.
And caregivers also have their own role. Trying to build from knowledge, experience, and skills being built from the home.
Okay.
There are different programs altogether, but then, in having a general program that will only affect the persons with disabilities generally, particularly women and girls, we must have to keep in mind that let's also include the caregivers and the parents together, because if this program just get towards the development or protection or making provision for the person with disability, leaving out the caregiver, leaving for the parents, and a workable program that will involve all these stakeholders, so that the target we know that is to empower or to educate or sensitize the person with disabilities. But then we must have to put into consideration every other factor that is around such a person, so that as the person will be advised on one angle, the same advice will be from a different angle, for parental care. The person with disability will be better informed, better enlightened, and also take an informed decision when it comes to the issue of the general well-being.
Okay, thank you. Let me come to Treasure. Still on the issue of educating the caregivers and parents. Gang sort of differentiated that there's a different aspect of training for caregivers and also for parents. For somebody who is listening, not even just for caregivers right now, parents, but also for individuals who live in communities where we have persons with disabilities. What form of education do we need to start giving them with regards to making them understand that they need to create a safe space for these persons?
Beautiful. The culture of shaming should be addressed. Then how we raise our boys too. Provide positive masculinity. I was shocked when I was asking my son. I said, okay, we have to come up with contribution. What aspect? He said he wants to fight gender-based violence. I was shocked. I said, oh, okay. Like I'm living today, I'm like telling him, oh, I'm going to be speaking to something that boils down to, say, give a shout out to me. So, so that's a shout out anyway. But then you find out that if we allow our boys embrace this, we had a session where 8-year-old boys were saying, why I had to slap that girl is because she's not my type. So that can begin to happen from the family, encouraging social norms that encourages positive masculinity. Then we must also understand that perpetrators sometimes or oftentimes are actually these caregivers and very close persons to the family. Then besides that, for the community, I like the news you gave earlier on where They are being asked not to shame girls, but girls
Yeah.
that have gone through this, and seeing them as survivors rather than victims can help them actually pull through and bring resilience. So then we should also encourage therapy. Thank God you have a counselor here with us.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
encourage therapy, encourage that bouncing back
Okay.
for that person with a disability, of course, from accessible point. We have other disability spectrum. Take, for instance, a child with cerebral palsy.
Yes.
You find out that those particular ones, you should be focusing on the caregivers. Drivers are molesting them when they need to take them for therapy sessions. It's bad out there. So, but then, like I always say, we are work in progress, and I trust that forums like this or enlightenment program like this will send a message, even if it is for one person. And I know you have millions and millions of followers and all that can pick and be able to say, where is my part? I want to play my role. Everybody has a role to play. It has to be multi-sectoral.
Okay.
It's not a one size fits all. We could be very creative in the things that we do. You leverage the social media, but most importantly, also ensure that you come around the families who have these girls and women with disability and say, how can I help you? What do you need?
Yes.
And come up with very creative things. Then don't make assumptions, because oftentimes we assume and take decisions and we don't know that is even much more hurtful.
Exactly.
Thank
All right.
you.
You want to make any contribution to what Treasurer said, gang?
Well, she really hit the nail on the head, and provision of counseling services, and also reaching them at home and their place of worship, in the places of wherever you find them. Take the program to them. When you take the program to them, they own it and they begin to speak out. So until we do that, the culture of silence will continue to remain with us, and more of these social workers will continue to be a menace in our communities.
Okay. Thank you very much. This is still the big question on Women Radio 91.7. It's 16 minutes to 10. And if you are just joining us on the big question this morning, we are having a conversation with regards to the 16 days of activism. Today is day 6 of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And we are addressing violence against women and girls with a disability. Let's also talk about with regards to how the issues around these survivors are being handled, because you talked about counseling, and I think I'd like Nkechi to speak on this issue of counseling, on how important it is for not just the survivor now to get counseling, but also maybe the caregiver. Take, for example, I heard of a story of, she just left the child in the house, quickly went to get something. And in the bit of, normally she said she would go out with the child, but that particular day, she just left the child indoor and let me just go and be back. And then, the girl was raped, and the girl is actually blind. So it was even more difficult to place a hand on who could have done this. And so, so the caregiver, that's, I think it was the mother of the child, was actually worried, because normally she said she would go out with the child. But that day, she just, let me just leave this child in the house. I'll be back. And I told the child I'll be back. And, when things like that happen, how do we deal with it, Nkechi?
Thank you so much, Gang and Treasure, for everything that you have been sharing. It has just been so important. So we have to start from the awareness of the importance of counseling. We've already started that. There have been a lot of mental health awareness that has been going on in recent times, but we need to help people see the value. Again and again, I have people contact me for counseling, and when we have some sort of discussion, they're supposed to contact, have to pay for the session and all that, even at the lowest price sometimes, and with no need to call the price. When you let them know that, you can do this, less than 5,000 or less than $13, you can even have this, I can do this for you, because they disappear. Some people disappear. Why is that happening with some people, not all? It is because they have not seen the value in counseling yet. A lot of people, you have the 20% that say the counselor are willing to invest and all that. So that value in counseling and understanding why it is important is something that we need to keep advocating for as counselors, and we have already started that. But a lot of stakeholders as well that see the importance of counseling can also join in helping people understand that. Because when we do that, when we help people see the importance of this counseling, just the way people see value in
Okay.
entertainment,
Yeah.
music, they are going to now be able to look for that. Oh, where are they? Because they are there. Look at, okay, so I'm here now. So you begin to look for, oh, where are they? Where can I seek them out? And of
Okay.
course, what you seek, you now find.
Yeah.
So it is when we've taken that first step, we would then now have, look at, for example, now meeting Treasure today, and of course, we're going to connect and so on and so forth. So we will now then begin to have counselors come into the communities where they are needed. But we have to see value in our counselors and our therapists, because if not, it's going to look like, what are they doing? How are they going to add to my life? And if you're already coming with that kind of mindset, even if the person is saying, okay, I dash you, you're not going to find it useful for your life.
Thank you. I want us to quickly talk about the government, because we cannot talk about this inclusion without necessarily talking about the government. I remember, during the coronavirus, and Treasure, I most appreciate your team. A couple of times we spoke with various people with regards to how much effort was being done to, ensure that those persons with disability communities were taken care of during the pandemic. But a lot still needs to be done. With regards to gender-based violence, with regards to, the issue of victimization, discrimination, there's still a lot that still needs to be done. Let me start with Treasure on, the efforts that needs to be put in by government, civil society, even individuals, to be able to, bring an end to gender-based violence in the community of the disabled.
Thank you, Daniel. Like I always say, it takes a multi-sectoral approach. When we say it takes a village to raise a child, yes, government has to provide enabling environment for this to thrive. Thank God now that we have a disability commission, so I am looking forward to a lot of discussions in the year coming. But for the coronavirus, I'm sure a lot of discussions are on. We now have a disability law. Lagos had has way back 2011.
Okay.
So there's a need for creating platforms for awareness of the provisions of that law. So looking at it from a legal framework and not just a charity or philanthropic or a privilege. Someone said, Jesse Jackson said, when everyone is included, everyone wins. So government providing the enabling environment, looking at like Mr. Giang had mentioned, sign language interpreters in the hospital setting.
Yes.
But beyond the hospital, our police. Then for families, I want to look at government providing platforms for independent living. I had one of my friends who was with a physical disability. She was already a graduate. Her parents wasn't allowing her to come out. They practically lock her in the house. The day she was telling, she said it took an uncle who came and said something that looks like a holiday and all that and allowed her. And today she's a strong voice out there. But that part is something that she has kept. And I said, no, you need to bring this out, because oftentimes I've had a 14-year-old who is coming, a 10-year-old who is coming to the school to come and see her sister who is deaf, who is a 14-year-old. And I asked her, I said, why are you here? She said, I came to pick my sister. That's her elder sister. I came to pick my sister. And I'm like, who is your senior here? Who is picking who? So to her, because she's hearing, because she's without a disability at that time, she feels there's a seniority about her. So government has a lot to do with awareness, but like I always say, it's a multi-sectoral approach. It's a big cake that we all can eat from, and it cannot be exhaustible.
All right, let me get your comments on this, Gang Moses.
Yeah, you mentioned, we need to have that approach to solving issues like that, and the call is having the right.
Hello, Moses. I'm gonna have to try to drop this call, and I can barely hear you because of the network. But we are very much at the end of this conversation this morning, and let me just get your stand this morning, Nkechi. Treasure, on what's your stand with regards to violence against women and girls with disability?
My stand is a big no to violence, and I let's provide therapy. Let's provide the value of counseling at the barest minimum. Those survivors of gender-based violence should be provided opportunity to speak out. No more silence. Let's break the culture of silence. And for every one of us, let's come on board. Let's put an arm round, even though there's a social distancing, right? But let's find ways to stretch an arm. Thank God for emojis that have been created. But beyond, on a lighter note, please, let's say no. Let's a strong no at that. And for those, even the perpetrators, when they come out clean, let's also provide therapy, because oftentimes that part is not looked at. Let's also provide therapy for such individuals, and let's seek to find out why they do what they do. Then encourage and support positive masculinity. Provide a lot of legal palliative, because as much as we can, provide early education, early intervention for lifelong learning opportunities for our persons with disabilities. And once again, I want to thank WFM really for always highlighting issues as this. And I trust that as more people listen, we take more action, become much more creative in also adding our voice.
All right.
Let's just leave no one behind.
All right, leave no one behind. And Nkechi, just have your final words on this conversation.
Yeah, I think Treasure already said part of what I wanted to say, which is let us all begin to see the value of counseling and let us take it seriously. If you do not think that you need it, the person by your side, your neighbor, they may need it. So do well to see value in it, and also help people to help educate people as well, and refer them to sources and channels where they can also find counselors.
All right. And on that note, we want to say thank you for being part of the big question this morning. Special thanks to Treasure Uchegbe and also to Gang Moses Sunday Sander for joining us this morning, and Nkechi Manuel Signal for being part of the big question today. Today is day 6 of the 16 days of activism, and we just want to let everybody know that we must all take a stand against gender-based violence. We must take a stand against gender-based violence, and it is important for us all to be involved. Please let us begin to spark that conversations in our workplace, in our religious organizations. Let's begin to call for the proper inclusion of persons with disability. Let's not make it look like it's a charity work. We must see the proper inclusion and see these people as our everyday individuals in our communities. At 10 o'clock will be Radio Doctor. Today is Monday, and it's going to be Children's Health. My name is Daniel Adaja. We'll do this again tomorrow morning at exactly 9:15 to 10. Good morning.
Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at WFM 917.
Hello, bá mi, ṣé láàfíà lẹwà máa mi ń kọ́ ńbẹ̀ àti gbogbo abúlé.
Adúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ Ọlọ́run. Ṣé o ṣọ́ra ṣe nítorí àrùn kòrónà tó wà lóde o?
Àlàáfíà ni mo wà o. Kòrónà ti kó gbá wọlé. Kódà gbogbo nǹkan ti padà bọ̀ sípò. Èmi gan lópin ọ̀sẹ̀ yìí ń bọ̀ lábúlé. Àáyàn ẹ̀yìn àti màámi ń yún mí gan ni.
Ọmọ mi, ayọ̀rẹ́ náà yọ àwa náà. Ṣùgbọ́n kò tí ì ta kókó láti wálé báyìí. A máa bá ọ sọ̀rọ̀ lórí ẹ̀rọ ìbáraẹnisọ̀rọ̀.
Kòrónà ò tí ì lọ o. Ìjọba kan rọwọ́ nǹkan díẹ̀ láti mú ayé rọrùn fún gbogbo wa ní o. Torí iṣẹ́ ilé tí mo ń ṣe yẹn gan, mo fẹ́ parí ẹ̀. Ṣé ó yí ọ? Bàbá àfowóránṣẹ́, a sì máa ṣàdúrà fún ọ.
Àwọn àjọ NCDC ti sọ pé mẹ́ta nínú àwọn ènìyàn 5 tí wọ́n ti kú láti ọwọ́ àrùn kòrónà jẹ́ àwọn tí ọjọ́ orí wọn lé ní 50 ọdún.